In this video, we're about to set sail on one of the most unbelievable journeys ever attempted, a solo round-the-world adventure in an 18-foot sailboat. That's right, while most of us dream of crossing oceans in sturdy cruisers, this determined American took on the entire planet aboard a boat barely bigger than a minivan. It's a story that defies logic, pushes the limits of human endurance, and proves that size isn't everything. Courage, preparation, and sheer willpower can take you farther than the eye can see. Along the way, he battled massive storms, navigated unforgiving currents, and faced solitude on a scale most of us can't imagine. But how did he prepare? What did he learn from months at sea with so little space and no room for error? And most importantly, what drove him to do it? In this episode, we'll unpack the heart-pounding moments, the tactical decisions that kept him alive, and the quiet reflections that made this journey more than just a feat of seamanship. It became a test of the human spirit. So tighten those halyards and brace yourself. This isn't just a story about sailing. It's about chasing the horizon, no matter the odds. Stay with us until the end and let us know. Would you attempt the world in a boat this small? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more true sailing adventures and timeless lessons from the sea. Let's get underway. The sun rose over Chesapeake Bay, casting a golden glow on the bustling harbor of Norfolk, Virginia. Ethan Carter stood barefoot on the deck of Stellar, his 18-foot fiberglass sloop, feeling the cool morning breeze play across his face. This was the culmination of years of dreaming, planning, and sacrifice, a solo circumnavigation of the globe in one of the smallest vessels ever attempted. For Ethan, this journey was more than an adventure. It was a tribute to his father, Daniel Carter, a fisherman who had taught him the ways of the sea before being lost to a storm off the coast of Maryland when Ethan was just 12. Now at 34, Ethan was ready to face the same ocean that had taken his father, armed with knowledge, determination, and a boat that embodied both resilience and ingenuity. The genesis of Stellar wasn't your average sailboat. She was custom-built in a small shipyard in Seattle, Washington, designed specifically for long-distance voyages despite her diminutive size. Every inch of her construction reflected meticulous attention to detail and a deep understanding of what it would take to survive thousands of miles alone. Her hull was crafted from lightweight yet durable fiberglass, reinforced with Kevlar panels, to withstand collisions with debris or coral reefs. Beneath the waterline, a swing keel with water ballast provided stability while allowing her to navigate shallow harbors and anchorages, an essential feature for a vessel so small. Above decks, Stellar sported a sleek carbon fiber mast, chosen not only for its strength but also for its ability to reduce weight aloft. Her sails were equally well thought out. A furling jib allowed Ethan to reef quickly during sudden squalls, while the mainsail featured 3 sets of reef points to adapt to varying wind conditions. This flexibility was crucial, as Ethan knew. He'd encounter everything from gentle trade winds to howling gales in the roaring 40s. Inside, the cabin was stripped down to essentials. There was no room for luxuries. Every item aboard served a purpose. A compact GPS chart plotter mounted near the tiller provided navigation data, supplemented by a handheld sextant tucked into a waterproof case beneath the companionway steps. Communication equipment included a VHF radio for short-range contact and an Iridium satellite phone for emergencies. Solar panels affixed to the foredeck powered the boat's minimal electronics, including LED lights and a small bilge pump. Ethan had also installed a mechanical wind vane steering system, a critical piece of gear for reducing fatigue during long passages. Unlike electronic autopilots, which drain precious battery power, the wind vane used the force of the wind itself to keep the boat on course. It was a marvel of simplicity and reliability, though Ethan understood that even the best systems could fail. To prepare for such eventualities, He carried spare parts for every major component, from rudder bolts to sail hanks. Provisions were another area where careful planning paid off. Space constraints meant Ethan couldn't carry bulky canned goods, so he opted for vacuum-sealed freeze-dried meals instead. These required little storage space and could be rehydrated with fresh water produced by Stellar's manual desalination unit. He packed energy bars, dried fruits, and nuts for quick snacks during busy watches, along with a generous supply of coffee, his lifeline during sleep-deprived nights. Medical supplies included a comprehensive first aid kit, stocked with antihistamines for jellyfish stings, antibiotics for infections, and painkillers for headaches caused by prolonged exposure to sunlight. Route planning, a journey across oceans before. Setting sail, Ethan spent months poring over charts and weather patterns, plotting a route that balanced safety with efficiency. His plan followed a classic circumnavigation path, tailored to accommodate the limitations of an 18-foot boat. The first leg would take him from Norfolk to Cape Horn via the South Atlantic High, a high-pressure system known for steady trade winds and relatively calm seas. This initial stretch covered approximately 2,500 miles, passing through some of the world's busiest shipping lanes before entering the remote expanses of the Southern Ocean. From Cape Horn, Ethan intended to cross the Pacific Ocean en route to Hawaii, a daunting 3,000-mile passage through the infamous Roaring Forties. Here, relentless westerlies promised fast sailing speeds, but posed significant challenges due to towering waves and unpredictable storms. Timing would be critical. He aimed to reach these latitudes during the Northern Hemisphere's summer, June to August, to minimize risks associated with extreme cold and icebergs. After reaching Hawaii, Ethan planned to head westward toward California, then arc south into the Indian Ocean. This segment, spanning roughly 4,500 miles, included navigating the doldrums, a region notorious for light winds and oppressive heat, as well as dealing with powerful currents like the Agulhas Current off South Africa. Finally, he would round the Cape of Good Hope and return to Norfolk via the South Atlantic, completing the loop with a final 2,000-mile leg. Each section of the journey presented unique obstacles. In the South Atlantic, he anticipated battling calms near the equator and dodging commercial traffic around key choke points like the Panama Canal. The Pacific demanded vigilance against rogue waves and isolation-induced fatigue, while the Indian Ocean brought concerns about piracy and treacherous reefs. Yet, despite these dangers, Ethan felt confident in his preparation. Preparing for the unknown beyond technical considerations, Ethan recognized that mental fortitude would be just as important as physical endurance. Solo sailors often describe their journeys as periods of profound introspection, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. To cope with loneliness, Ethan brought along a journal to document his thoughts and experiences, hoping to find solace in writing. He also downloaded audiobooks onto a waterproof MP3 player, choosing titles that ranged from maritime history to science fiction, a reminder of worlds beyond the endless blue horizon. Safety drills became part of his daily routine in the weeks leading up to departure. He practiced man-overboard recoveries using a weighted buoy, rehearsed emergency repairs under simulated storm conditions, and memorized protocols for contacting search and rescue services. Each exercise reinforced his confidence in Stellar's capabilities and in his own ability to handle whatever the sea threw at him. On the eve of his departure, Ethan gathered friends and family at the dock for a farewell celebration. As they shared stories and laughter under the stars, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Tomorrow, he would leave behind familiar shores and step into the unknown. But as he looked at the faces of those who supported him, their eyes shining with pride, he knew he wasn't truly alone. The spirit of his father, the lessons of countless mentors, and the collective wisdom of generations of sailors would accompany him across the oceans. At dawn the next morning, Ethan cast off lines and raised Stellar's sails. With the rising sun at his back and the promise of adventure ahead, he pointed the bow eastward and began the voyage of a lifetime. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon as Stellar slipped out of Chesapeake Bay, her sails catching the gentle morning breeze. Ethan Carter stood at the tiller, his eyes scanning the coastline one last time before Norfolk disappeared behind him. The city's vibrant colors faded into a distant haze, replaced by the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. For the next several weeks, this vast, unbroken blue would be his only companion. Though the journey had just begun, Ethan knew that the South Atlantic held its own set of challenges: calms near the equator, unpredictable squalls, and relentless swells that could test both sailor and vessel to their limits. The trade winds and the doldrums. For the first few days, the trade winds were kind to Stellar. Steady breezes from the southeast pushed her along at a comfortable 3 knots, allowing Ethan to settle into a rhythm. He divided his day into 4-hour watches, alternating between steering, monitoring instruments, and performing maintenance tasks. During daylight hours, he checked the rigging for chafe, inspected the bilge for leaks, and ensured that all hatches were securely fastened. At night, he relied on the wind vane to hold course while he caught brief naps in the cramped cabin. The time Stellar reached tender north latitude, the weather began to shift. Clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind grew erratic. This was the edge of the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ, commonly known as the doldrums, a region notorious for its oppressive heat, light winds, and frequent thunderstorms. As Ethan entered this zone, progress slowed dramatically. For nearly a week, Stellar drifted aimlessly under a blistering sun, her sails hanging limp against the mast. The lack of movement was maddening. Every hour felt like an eternity as Ethan stared at the motionless sails, willing them to fill with wind. To conserve battery power, he turned off the GPS chart plotter and switched to dead reckoning, using a handheld compass and logbook to estimate his position. Water became a precious commodity. With the solar panels producing minimal energy, he rationed usage of the desalination unit, relying instead on stored freshwater reserves. Even simple tasks like cooking freeze-dried meals required careful planning as the stove consumed valuable fuel. Despite these hardships, Ethan found moments of beauty amid the monotony. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky erupted in shades of orange and pink, reflected perfectly on the glassy surface of the sea. Schools of flying fish skimmed across the water, their silvery bodies glinting in the fading light. A pod of dolphins appeared alongside Stellar, leaping and spinning in playful arcs. These fleeting encounters reminded Ethan why he loved the ocean: the raw, untamed majesty that no landlocked existence could replicate. Eventually, the winds returned, albeit fitfully. Squalls rolled in without warning, drenching Ethan and soaking the deck. He learned to anticipate their approach by watching cloud formations and listening for changes in wind direction. When a squall hit, he reefed the mainsail quickly, reducing sail area to prevent capsizing. Each squall brought a brief burst of speed, propelling Stellar forward until the calm returned. Progress remained slow, but it was progress nonetheless. The South Atlantic high and beyond, once clear of the doldrums, Ethan encountered the South Atlantic high, a sprawling high-pressure system that dominates much of the southern hemisphere. Here, the trade winds resumed their steady push eastward, carrying Stellar toward the remote reaches of the ocean. The days grew cooler as he sailed farther from the equator, and the nights became crisp and star-filled. Navigating this stretch required constant vigilance. Shipping traffic increased significantly as Stellar approached key routes connecting North America, Africa, and Europe. Using the AIS automatic identification system receiver installed on board, Ethan tracked nearby vessels, ensuring he maintained a safe distance. On several occasions, he radioed larger ships via VHF to confirm intentions and avoid collisions. These interactions highlighted the stark contrast between his tiny sloop and the massive cargo carriers plowing through the waves, a reminder of how vulnerable he truly was. One night, while hand-steering during a watch, Ethan spotted a faint green glow on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be bioluminescence, but as he drew closer, the source became clear. A derelict fishing net tangled around a buoy. Such debris posed a serious hazard to small boats like Stellar, capable of entangling the rudder or propeller and leaving the vessel stranded. Ethan altered course immediately, steering wide of the obstruction. It was a sobering moment, one that underscored the importance of maintaining situational awareness at all times. Storms and survival. As Stellar approached the southern tip of Florida, the weather took a turn for the worse. A cold front swept in from the southwest, bringing gale-force winds and towering swells. The once placid seas transformed into a chaotic maelstrom, with waves cresting higher than the boat's mast. Ethan battened down the hatches and donned foul-weather gear, preparing for what promised to be a long and grueling fight. The storm tested every ounce of his seamanship. Waves crashed over the bow, flooding the cockpit and threatening to swamp the boat. Ethan worked tirelessly to keep Stellar pointed into the wind, adjusting the sails and rudder to maintain control. Sleep was impossible. Exhaustion gnawed at him as he clung to the tiller, his muscles aching from hours of tension. At one point, disaster struck. A rogue wave lifted Stellar's stern, causing the rudder post to crack under the strain. Without a functioning rudder, the boat became unmanageable, drifting sideways in the tumultuous seas. Panic threatened to overwhelm Ethan, but he forced himself to focus. Drawing on years of experience, he rigged a jury-rigged tiller using a spare boom and some rope, creating a makeshift steering mechanism. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed him to regain partial control of the boat. With the temporary fix in place, Ethan plotted a course for the nearest safe harbor, Key West, a small outpost located just north of the Florida Keys. The detour added nearly a week to his journey, but it was a necessary precaution. Upon arrival, local sailors helped him repair the damaged rudder, sharing stories of their own battles with the Southern Ocean. Their camaraderie provided a much-needed morale boost, reminding Ethan that he was part of a global community united by a love of the sea. Reflections on resilience. Leaving Key West, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The storm had been a humbling experience, a stark reminder of nature's power and unpredictability. Yet it had also reinforced his belief in the resilience of both sailor and vessel. Stellar had weathered the worst the South Atlantic could throw at her, emerging battered but intact. And Ethan, though physically drained, felt stronger mentally, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt and endure. As he resumed his course toward Cape Horn, the memory of the storm lingered in his mind. He knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The roaring Forties awaited, with their legendary ferocity and unforgiving conditions. But for now, he focused on the present, savoring the rhythmic creak of the rigging and the whisper of wind in the sails. The sea, for all its dangers, was also a teacher, a source of wisdom and self-discovery. And so, with determination etched into every line of his weather-beaten face, Ethan pressed onward, guided by the stars and driven by the dream that had carried him this far. The Southern Ocean greeted Ethan Carter with a ferocity that left no room for doubt. It was here to test him, to push Stellar and her captain to their absolute limits. After rounding Cape Horn, where the jagged peaks of Tierra del Fuego loomed like silent sentinels against the endless gray horizon, Ethan entered the roaring Forties. This stretch of the Pacific Ocean, notorious for its relentless westerlies and towering waves, would become both his greatest adversary and ally. The winds promised swift progress eastward toward Hawaii, but they came at a cost: isolation, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of disaster. The loneliness of the long-distance sailor. Stellar surged forward under full sail, slicing through 30-foot swells. Ethan found himself grappling with a new kind of challenge, one that had little to do with navigation or survival. It was loneliness, an insidious companion that crept into his thoughts during the long, sleepless nights. Days blurred together in a monotonous rhythm of watches, maintenance checks, and brief meals. There were no voices except his own, no laughter, save the occasional creak of the rigging or splash of water against the hull. To combat the creeping sense of isolation, Ethan turned to rituals. Each morning he brewed a cup of coffee using a small stove tucked beneath the cockpit, a ritualistic act that marked the start of another day at sea. He read aloud from his journal entries, imagining his late father listening somewhere beyond the waves. At night, he studied the constellations, tracing familiar patterns in the sky while whispering stories to the stars. These small acts of connection helped anchor him, reminding him that even in solitude, he was part of something greater than himself. Yet there were moments when the vast emptiness of the ocean felt suffocating. One evening, as twilight faded into darkness, Ethan spotted a distant light on the horizon. His heart leapt at the sight. Another vessel, perhaps a fellow sailor sharing this desolate expanse. He reached for the VHF radio, hesitating before keying the microphone. "This is Stellar, calling unknown vessel," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Static crackled back in response. He tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. The U.S. light grew dimmer, eventually disappearing altogether. Whether it was a ship, a buoy, or merely a trick of the mind, Ethan couldn't say. But the moment stayed with him, a poignant reminder of how fragile human connections could be in such an unforgiving environment. Close encounters, whales and cargo ships. If loneliness was a psychological battle, then encounters with marine life and other vessels became physical tests of nerve. One moonlit night, as Stellar ghosted along under a half-filled jib, Ethan heard a deep rumble beneath the boat. Before he could react, a massive form breached the surface just meters from the port side. A sperm whale, its barnacled skin glistening in the moonlight. The creature exhaled explosively, sending a spray of mist into the air. Ethan froze, gripping the tiller tightly. He knew that whales generally avoided boats, but collisions weren't unheard of, especially at night when visibility was poor. For several tense minutes, the whale circled Stellar, its sonar clicks reverberating through the hull. Ethan switched off the running lights, hoping to minimize disturbance. Eventually, the magnificent animal submerged, leaving behind only ripples on the water's surface. While whales inspired awe, cargo ships evoked fear. Near the Hawaiian Islands, Ethan narrowly avoided disaster when a massive container vessel bore down on him without altering course. Using AIS data, he identified the Isan's ship as MSC Adriatic, a behemoth over 1,000 feet long. Despite repeated attempts to hail the crew via VHF, there was no response. Acting quickly, Ethan referenced COLREG's, international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, and made a bold decision. He adjusted Stellar's heading to cross swans, astern of the ship, timing his maneuver carefully to avoid being overtaken. As the vessel thundered past, its wake rocking Stellar violently, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Later, he reflected on the incident, realizing how easily a misstep could have ended his journey, and possibly his life. Equipment failure, and jury rigging. No matter how meticulously prepared, every sailor knows that equipment failure is inevitable. In the middle of the Pacific, far from any landfall, Ethan faced one of his most harrowing mechanical breakdowns. South of New Zealand, a rogue wave struck Stellar amidships, snapping the wind vane clean off its mount. Without this critical piece of gear, steering the boat manually became a non-stop ordeal. For nearly 48 hours, Ethan hand-steered Stellar, fighting fatigue as hypothermia set in due to the frigid 40-degree temperatures. His fingers cramped around the tiller, and his body ached from the constant strain. Determined not to lose ground, he rigged a drogue, a cone-shaped device designed to stabilize the boat by creating drag, to reduce yawing. Once stabilized, he scavenged spare parts from the emergency toolkit and fashioned a temporary fix using a length of stainless steel rod and some epoxy resin. Though crude, the repair held long enough for him to reach calmer waters. Writing A. Iamure, his log later, Ethan noted, "The sea doesn't care about your plans, it only respects resilience." Those words became a mantra, echoing in his mind whenever doubts crept in. Navigating coral labyrinths and hidden dangers, reaching Hawaii brought a welcome reprieve from the open ocean's fury. But navigating the archipelago's coral atolls presented its own set of challenges. One particularly treacherous night, Ethan attempted to enter a narrow channel near Maui. Relying on a handheld depth sounder and the faint glow of phosphorescent plankton illuminating the shallows, he threaded Stellar through a maze of razor-sharp reefs. Disaster struck when a sudden gust pushed the boat sideways, grounding her on a submerged reef. Panic surged within him, but years of experience kicked in. Calming himself, Ethan used the depth sounder to assess the situation. Fortunately, the tide was rising. He waited patiently, timing his escape with the incoming surge. After what felt like an eternity, Stellar floated free, her keel scraping audibly as she slid off the coral. Exhausted but relieved, Ethan anchored in a secluded lagoon, vowing never to attempt nighttime navigation in such conditions again. The incident served as a stark reminder of the ocean's dual nature, beautiful yet merciless, generous yet unforgiving. Reflections on the Pacific Passage. By the time Stellar reached Oahu, Ethan had sailed over 6,000 miles since leaving Norfolk. The Pacific had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, teaching him humility and adaptability. From close calls with whales and cargo ships to equipment failures and coral hazards, each challenge had forced him to dig deeper, to find strength he didn't know he possessed, but the Pacific had also rewarded him. On clear days, he marveled at the vibrant blues of the water, ranging from turquoise shallows to indigo depths. Sunsets painted the sky in fiery hues, while bioluminescence transformed the ocean into a glittering galaxy at night. These fleeting moments of beauty reminded him why he had embarked on this journey in the first place, to connect with the raw, untamed essence of the sea. As Ethan prepared to leave Hawaii and head west toward California, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The hardest leg of the journey, the Indian Ocean, lay ahead with its doldrums, piracy risks, and powerful currents. Yet, armed with lessons learned and scars earned, he knew he was ready. The Indian Ocean stretched before Ethan Carter like an enigmatic frontier, a vast expanse of water that whispered promises of adventure and danger in equal measure. As Stellar sailed westward from California toward South Africa, the journey became less about conquering nature and more about navigating the complexities of human conflict, treacherous geography, and unpredictable weather. The ocean here was not just a physical challenge. It was a psychological battlefield where fear and courage danced in tandem. Piracy, shadows on the horizon. One of the most daunting aspects of the Indian Ocean leg was the ever-present threat of piracy, particularly near the Chagos Archipelago and the Gulf of Aden. Despite international patrols and anti-piracy initiatives, reports of attacks persisted, with smaller vessels often targeted due to their vulnerability. For Ethan, sailing alone in an 18-foot sloop, the risk was palpable. Early one morning, as Stellar approached the Maldives, Ethan spotted a skiff trailing him in the distance. At first, he dismissed it as local fishermen, but something about its erratic movements set off alarm bells. Through binoculars, he could make out armed figures aboard the vessel, their intentions unclear. His pulse quickened as the skiff closed the gap, its engine growling menacingly. Ethan sprang into action, recalling advice from a retired British Royal Marine he'd met in Cape Town. He activated Stellar's AIS spoofing device, a tactic designed to mask the boat's true position by broadcasting false coordinates. Simultaneously, he altered a course sharply, heading toward a nearby reef system where the shallow waters would ground the larger skiff. For several tense minutes, the chase unfolded like a deadly game of cat and mouse. The pirates fired warning shots, their bullets splashing harmlessly into the water behind Stellar. Ethan maintained his composure, zigzagging through narrow channels and using the wind to his advantage. Eventually, the skiff gave up, retreating into the open ocean. Breathing heavily, Ethan allowed himself a moment of relief, but the encounter left an indelible mark. From that point onward, he kept a loaded flare gun within arm's reach and maintained a vigilant watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. Coral reefs and grounding dangers navigating the Maldives' intricate coral atolls proved equally perilous. By day, the turquoise waters revealed stunning underwater landscapes teeming with life. But at night, the reefs transformed into invisible hazards lurking just beneath the surface. One fateful evening, Ethan misjudged a channel entrance, mistaking a faint glow of phosphorescence for deeper water. Stellar struck a submerged reef with a sickening crunch, her keel grinding against the coral. Panic surged within him, but experience once again guided his response. He immediately shut off the engine to prevent further damage and assessed the situation using a handheld depth sounder. The tide was rising slowly, offering a glimmer of hope. Ethan anchored securely, ensuring the boat wouldn't drift further onto the reef. Then he waited, timing his escape with the incoming surge. After 2 agonizing hours, Stellar floated free, her hull groaning as she slipped off the coral. Though battered, she remained seaworthy. Exhausted but relieved, Ethan limped into a nearby lagoon to inspect the damage. Scrapes marred the keel, but nothing structural had been compromised. This incident reinforced the importance of caution when navigating unfamiliar waters. From then on, Ethan relied solely on daylight passages through reef-strewn areas, meticulously plotting courses based on charts and local knowledge gleaned from other sailors. The Agulha's current gamble south of Madagascar, Ethan faced another formidable adversary, the Agulha's current, one of the world's strongest ocean currents. Flowing southwest along Africa's southeastern coast at speeds exceeding 3 knots, the Agulhas posed significant risks to small boats, particularly near Cape Agulhas, the continent's southernmost tip. To minimize exposure to the current's ferocity, Ethan adopted a technique called staggering, angling Stellar's course at approximately 160 degrees relative to the current's flow. This strategy reduced the likelihood of being swept uncontrollably into busy shipping lanes or turbulent eddies. However, staggering required precise navigation and constant adjustments to maintain optimal speed and heading. As Stellar entered the Agulhas current, the seas grew rougher, with steep waves forming where the current clashed with prevailing winds. Ethan worked tirelessly at the tiller, compensating for sudden shifts in wind direction and wave patterns. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, his body fueled by adrenaline and sheer determination. Despite the challenges, the Agulhas also offered rewards. Its powerful flow propelled Stellar forward at impressive speeds, shaving valuable time off the journey. Watching the GPS display tick upward, Ethan felt a surge of pride, not just in his boat's performance, but in his ability to harness the ocean's raw power, storm tactics, and survival skills. No passage through the Indian Ocean would be complete without confronting its infamous storms. Midway between Mauritius and Durban, a mesoscale squall caught Ethan off guard. Dark clouds gathered, rapidly blotting out the sun and plunging the sea into shadow. Within minutes, Hurricane-force winds howled across the deck, tearing at Stellar's sails and sending torrents of rain cascading down. Ethan acted swiftly, reefing the mainsail to reduce sail area and securing loose gear to prevent injury. He deployed a drogue to stabilize the boat, allowing her to ride the waves safely without broaching. Huddled in foul-weather gear, he braced himself against the cockpit coaming, gripping the tiller with white-knuckled intensity. The storm raged for nearly 8 hours, battering Stellar mercilessly. When it finally subsided, Ethan surveyed the damage. The solar panels were shattered, leaving him reliant on manual charging methods for essential electronics. Saltwater intrusion had shorted out the bilge pump motor, forcing him to hand pump water manually. Yet despite these setbacks, Stellar endured, her battered hull still slicing through the waves. Reflections on resilience and adaptability. By the time Ethan rounded Cape Agulhas and entered the South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean had left an indelible imprint on his soul. It had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, forcing him to confront fears both real and imagined. Pirates, coral reefs, and raging currents had pushed him to the brink. Yet each challenge had taught him invaluable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and trust. Trust in his boat, in his skills, and in his own capacity to endure. As Stellar sailed northward toward Cape Town, Ethan reflected on the journey so far. Nearly 3/4 of the circumnavigation lay behind him, yet the final leg promised its own unique trials. The South Atlantic awaited, with its trade winds, calms, and the looming specter of home. But for now, he focused on the present, letting the rhythm of the waves carry him forward, step by step, toward the culmination of his dream. The final leg of Ethan Carter's journey was both a homecoming and a reckoning. As Stellar sailed northward from Cape Town toward Norfolk, the South Atlantic stretched before them like an old friend, familiar yet unpredictable. This last stretch would demand everything Ethan had learned over the past 11 months. His technical prowess, his mental fortitude, and his ability to adapt to the whims of the sea. The ocean had tested him relentlessly, but now it seemed to whisper softly, inviting him to reflect on the trials he had overcome and the lessons he had absorbed along the way. The final storm, 300 miles from Norfolk, as if determined to deliver one last challenge, the South Atlantic unleashed a mesoscale squall that caught Ethan off guard. Dark clouds gathered with alarming speed, blotting out the stars and plunging the boat into an eerie darkness. Within moments, fierce winds tore through the rigging, snapping lines and shredding part of the mainsail. Rain lashed against the deck in horizontal sheets, turning the cockpit into a chaotic maelstrom. Ethan sprang into action, reefing what remained of the mainsail and securing loose gear. He deployed a drogue to stabilize Stellar, allowing her to ride the towering waves safely without broaching. But the storm's fury wasn't limited to wind and rain. It knocked out the solar panels, leaving Ethan without power for the GPS chart plotter and other essential electronics. With no modern navigation tools at his disposal, Ethan turned to celestial navigation, a skill he had honed during calmer nights under the Southern Cross. Retrieving his sextant from its waterproof case, he took a sight of Polaris, the North Star, calculating his latitude by measuring its angle above the horizon. Using dead reckoning and the ship's log, he estimated his longitude, plotting a course based on these rudimentary calculations. Though imprecise compared to GPS, this method kept him oriented enough to continue toward the United States. For nearly 12 hours, the storm raged, battering Stellar mercilessly. When it finally subsided, Ethan emerged from the cockpit soaked, exhausted, and covered in salt spray. Yet, despite the damage to his equipment, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The storm had been a reminder of how far he'd come, not just geographically, but personally. It was a testament to his growth as a sailor and as a human being. Whales as escorts. As Stellar approached the equator, the ocean grew calmer and the oppressive heat returned. One morning, as the first light of dawn painted the horizon in hues of gold and pink, Ethan spotted movement off the starboard bow. A pod of humpback whales surfaced gracefully, their massive bodies gliding effortlessly through the water. For several days, they accompanied Stellar, leaping and breaching in playful arcs that seemed almost celebratory. Ethan couldn't help but feel a deep connection to these majestic creatures. In many ways, they mirrored his own journey, enduring long migrations across vast distances, facing countless dangers, yet persevering with grace and resilience. He imagined his father watching from somewhere beyond the waves, perhaps embodied in the spirit of these whales. Their presence brought him comfort, a reassurance that he wasn't alone in this final push toward home. Navigating the equatorial calms, re-entering the doldrums near the equator, Ethan braced himself for another bout of stifling heat and frustrating calms. Progress slowed dramatically as Stellar drifted aimlessly beneath the blazing sun. To conserve energy, he rationed fresh water carefully, relying on the manual desalination unit sparingly. Meals were simple affairs, energy bars and dried fruit, consumed quickly between maintenance checks. Despite the monotony, Ethan found solace in routine. He cleaned the deck, inspected the rigging, and made minor repairs to damaged equipment. Each task provided a sense of purpose, a distraction from the oppressive stillness surrounding him. At night, he studied the constellations, tracing familiar patterns in the sky while reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The home stretch as Stellar crossed the equator, the trade winds returned, filling her sails with a steady breeze that carried them swiftly toward Norfolk. With each passing day, the coastline grew closer until finally, on October 12, 2025, Ethan spotted the familiar outline of Chesapeake Bay. His heart swelled with emotion as he steered Stellar into the harbor, greeted by a flotilla of local fishermen, waving American flags and cheering enthusiastically. Dockside, friends and family awaited him, their eyes shining with pride and admiration. As Ethan stepped onto solid ground for the first time in 11 months, he felt a mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. He had done it. He had circumnavigated the globe solo in an 18-foot sailboat, defying the odds and honoring his father's legacy in the process. Legacy of Stellar today? Stellar rests in San Francisco's Maritime Museum, her hull etched with the salt of 3 oceans. Her story serves as an inspiration to aspiring sailors everywhere, a testament to the indomitable spirit of exploration and the unbreakable bond between humans and the sea. Ethan, now a mentor to young sailors, teaches celestial navigation, survival tactics, and the art of seamanship. His mantra echoes in every lecture and workshop. The sea doesn't distinguish between 18 feet and 80 feet. It only asks, are you ready? Ethan's journey was more than a physical voyage. It was a pilgrimage of self-discovery, resilience, and triumph. Through storms, calms, and encounters with nature's wonders, he proved that even the smallest vessel can conquer the world's oceans if guided by courage, determination, and unwavering faith in oneself.